But how is it that we come to know what God's will is? We understand that God's will for us is good and very good. We understand that God's will for us is absolute good. But how do we then come to express and live out of the good that has been prepared for us? You've heard me say before that God is really meticulous and strategic in that God puts what is best for you within you. God never gives what is for you to somebody else. God puts what is best for you in you. And so out of God's infinite wisdom and omniscience, God knew that what was best for each of us was not to only be human beings having human experiences, but rather that we should be spiritual beings having spiritual experiences. And so as spiritual beings, one of the things that we must do is rediscover the approach of the spiritual essence. I submit to you that your spirit is intended to be a springboard. The spirit is intended to be a springboard. A springboard for what? A springboard to help us rise above the limitations of the human experience. So when we look at how it is we can be spiritual in human interactions, we have to remember that in order to be spiritual in human interactions, we can't simply settle for a human approach, even though it appears to be a human experience. Particularly, say particularly. Particularly when we find ourselves dealing with other folk. Emmett Fox once said that if a person could not get along with other people, they should make a sign, hang it in the closet or on the mirror where they could see it every day. And the sign should read, like attracts like. Meaning that we only encounter in our human interactions and in our relationships, we only encounter ourselves. And since we are only meeting ourselves, I submit to you that we ought to meet ourselves on a spiritual level. So let me just quickly give you 3 things that we must remember as we commit to being the spiritual beings that we were created to be. We do recognize that the only thing that can come from you is what is within you. You cannot produce anything that you are not. And so in order for us to be able to demonstrate the fruit of spirit, we must then have the seeds that can make the spirit fruitful. Does that make sense? And so what does it mean to demonstrate the fruit of spirit? It means that we demonstrate love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Not just when we're dealing with ourselves. Yeah, I heard somebody say, wow. Let me run through those again for you. We demonstrate in our human interactions, in our relationships, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That means, as Dr. Johnson would say, go within before you go off. So 3 things I want you to remember as you make the commitment to being spiritual. The first is to remember that every experience is a teacher. Every experience is a teacher. We learn from the persons, events, and circumstances that surround us. The challenge is that most of the time we don't realize we are in the classroom of life. We think that the experience is arbitrary or random, but there is no such thing as an arbitrary or random experience or encounter in a spiritual, meticulous, orderly universe. There are no mistakes or chance encounters when somebody pushes a button on you that you didn't realize you had. You are having a classroom moment and the person is presenting a test that perhaps you hadn't studied for. How is it that we can be spiritual in human experiences? We must recognize that every experience is a teacher. We are molded and shaped not by our circumstances, but from the reactions to those circumstances. And unless a challenge comes to you, you will never know what is truly within you. See, a tea bag is useless until it's dropped into a little hot water. And what we all too often want is to stay in the comfort zone of the box that has us sitting up on the shelf of potential. We want to stay where we are. We want to be complacent. Listen, it's comfortable to be in your comfortable space with your comfortable chair and your comfortable shoes with your comfortable house coat on. But spiritual beings rarely have an opportunity to be comfortable when they are more human than spiritual. And because it is the Father's good pleasure to help you grow into the truth of what you are, you, by essence of the goodness and greatness that is within you, attract to you experience, hot water experiences, I like to call them, where you have to dip in, where you have to be dropped in. See, sometimes you're just dropped in. You don't know how you got in this experience. It seems like you just dropped in this experience. Sometimes it seems like people are just dropped into your experience. But what the experience represents for us is an opportunity to get a deeper understanding. It's an opportunity to reach a higher level of understanding. It's an opportunity to reconstruct the meaning. What if what you thought the experience meant was only the fabrication of the way you see the experience? Recently, we saw an Olympic athlete make the headlines, make the front page, not because of what he was able to do in the pool, but because of an experience that he had at a gas station when he was the primary antagonist of the disruption in the gas station. But this athlete concocted in his mind this experience where somebody pulled up in a car and jumped out with all kinds of guns and machines and ready to take him and all of his friends to jail. But in his own mind, he would not get on the ground like the people told him to. Instead, he pulled his cape out and he put it on his back and he stood up tall and strong and he said, "They might get on the ground, but I will not, because I am." But aren't we like that sometimes? Don't we create messes in the bathroom? And then we call the circumstances that come about as a result of that something else, and then we make ourselves look bigger than we were in the experience because we didn't realize, Crystal, that the experience was a teacher. The mess you make is the mess you have to clean up. We have to realize that there is a splendid potential in us. We are meant for greatness and goodness. We have a larger work to do. But just like education is not the cramming of information into the mind without the drawing of the innate wisdom, so too the power that is resident within our souls must be developed as we strive and work inwardly. We have to remember that every experience is a teacher if we intend to be spiritual in human interactions. How can you be spiritual and human interactions, remember that every decision you make, say every decision I make. Remember that every decision you make, every day, in every way, the decisions that we are making, the choices that we are making is shaping the life that we will experience. Remember that every decision you make cuts a particular path to a particular experience. And those experiences then become our teachers. You don't like the class, change the mindset that attracted the experience. Each of us must make decisions that empower us to continually let go. We must make decisions that empower us to continually let go. You got to let that stuff go, right? You have to be conscious and intentional about letting go of the stuff that you are carrying around. Right? Like there's just something, Faye, that's a little odd about carrying around a 1985 hurt in a 2016 context. There's something that's a little unwise about reliving the pain from last year. Watch this. The relationship is over. Both of y'all are in separate places now. You still hurting over that? The argument happened 40 minutes ago. You still playing that argument back in your head? I should have said, next time he comes at me, I'm going to hit him with the left, right, left. You're toothless. And then you say, oh man, he's ruthless. My cousin told me about that line. I don't really listen. I didn't really listen to NWA, my cousin. My cousin keeps me abreast of all that kind of stuff. My cousin keeps me abreast of all the worldly stuff. I'm spiritual. I'm spiritual. I am spiritual. Just probably not that spiritual. You say, you know, y'all on to me. They're on to me. Each of us must make decisions that empower us to continuously let go of the negative beliefs, the destructive emotions, the tendencies to resist change. Gary Simmons says anything that is resistant to change is also resistant to growth. You can't grow if you don't change past the experiences that at least on a level you have outgrown. Here is how you know you've outgrown it. Here is how you know you've outgrown it. Here's how you know you've outgrown it. Physically, you're no longer in the same space with it. Mentally and emotionally, you might still be back there. But physically, if you're no longer physically in the same space with it, that's an indication to you that on some level, at least the human level, you've moved on. It's something when you can move on in the human, but not move on in the soul. Sometimes the mind and the heart becomes troubled by unfair treatment or injustice. We become troubled by fear and lack. We become troubled by sickness. We become troubled by upsetting gossip. Right? Sometimes you just get disturbed by what they say. You know what I'm saying? Like, everybody wants to be welcome. Nobody wants to be talked about. Nobody wants to be criticized. And we become disturbed by what they say. But who the heck are they? What in the heck do they know that their perception should make me unsettled? Just because they see it a certain way doesn't mean that I have to adopt that as my reality. How do you become spiritual in human interactions? Every day you have to make a decision to let them have their opinions. Because their opinions are just like their earlobes. Everybody has them. How do you do it? How do you become spiritual in human interactions, in human relationships? The number 3, you do so. The first thing that you do is remember that every experience is a teacher. The second thing you do is remember that every day you are making decisions. The third thing that I need you to do is elevate above it. Elevate above it. We were talking in the back, and we were talking about a quote from the First Lady of the United States when she said, when they go low, we go high. But it's difficult to elevate above it when you insist on being on the same level as it. It's challenging to elevate above it when you decide to take a bath in it. Right? See, it's one thing to sprinkle a little on like some cologne or perfume. It's a whole nother thing to drink it. See, if you sprinkle it on and it doesn't have the fragrance that you like, you can just wash it off. But if you internalize it, there's a whole nother process that you must go through in order to get it through your system. But it's got to pass through your system before you can let it go. There are some things that have no business in your system. What is your system? What is your system? Your system is the way you speak, the way you think, and the way you act. And so if your system is being informed and influenced by people who don't see it the way that you see it, then maybe it ought not be a part of your system. You have to be able to elevate above it. You have to be able to elevate above it. You elevate above it in the way that you speak, the way that you think, and the way that you act. The way that you speak, the way that you think, and the way that you act. So how is it that you might speak, think, and act when they criticize you? You don't criticize them. Pin drop moment right there. Because on the human level, when they criticize you, you open up both barrels and you give it to them. But on the spiritual level, you don't meet criticism on the same level of the critic. Because if the critic is intending to pull you down or separate you, you must by essence and virtue of their criticism already be above and beyond where they are. That means you have to agree to go back and find union with those who criticize you. You have to decide to be on the same level as those who would criticize you. And when you make that decision, you then attract more experiences that support that decision. I hope you hear me. So how do we do it? How do we do it? To meet criticism and condemnation in the spirit of love is to overcome this word evil with good. Repeat after me. There is no criticism, or condemnation in me, for me, or against me. I am under the law of divine love, and all is well with me and my world. There is no criticism or condemnation in me, for me, or against me. I am under the law of divine love, and all is well with me and my world. Watch this now. When we know and live under the law of divine love, and we know and recognize that all is well with us, these words can begin to lift the feelings of guilt, anxiety, and they can free us in our mind and in our heart. If you have allowed yourself, say allowed yourself. If you have allowed yourself to feel inadequate or inferior, remember that you are under the law of divine love. And because divine love is a magnet, it attracts you to that which you desire to be a part of. If you have listened and bought into negative criticism instead of listening to the Spirit of God, remember that the whispering of the still small voice holds the answer to you and for you, not what they say. Don't take their word over God's word. Take the proclamation that God speaks over your life as the truth for you. Who cares what they say? Scripture says it this way: be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Now listen, sometimes the experience comes just so you can have some patience. Just so you can learn to get some patience. I love it when I see it expressed with Joseph and his brothers. Joseph had a wonderful experience with his brothers. That's right, I said a wonderful experience with his brothers. His brothers were salty at him because he was swagged out and good at what he did. They were disappointed with him because there was something on him. And I submit to you that there's something on you that the people who are around you can't deal with. There's something in you. And listen, it's not that it's in you and not in them. It's just that it's in you and you recognize it. It's just that it's in you and you've committed yourself to bringing it out. It's not that you're more beautiful. It's just that you recognize that you are beauty. It's not that you deserve to have more. It's just that you recognize that it's the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. So his brothers they're salty. He's got the coat. And it's not just a regular old coat. It's a coat with a lot of colors. And every one of the colors accents and accentuates what is in him. Ooh, there's so much on you that brings out the best that is in you. There is so much around you that can't help but glorify what God has put in you. And people see it. It's okay if they see it, let them see it. Wear it well. But they were salty. So salty, in fact. Now, he was a little silly, too. I like him. That's my guy. You know. But you got to be careful about telling folks about stuff that ain't manifested yet. Because as soon as it looked like you hit a rut, the first thing we want to say is, now where's your God now? What about all that stuff they've been teaching you out there now? How come you having health challenges? You say God is your health. How come you having health challenges? You say God is your prosperity. How come you having money challenges? It's because sometimes you need a little hot water experience to bring out the good that is in you. It didn't come to take you down, it came to bring you out. Brothers they don't get it. They see something in them. They know there's something in them. They don't like that it's him, not them. They don't like that it's you. That's not your problem. What they think of you is none of your business. Yeah. So Joseph has a experience with his brothers. They're fed up with him. He had enough of him. He's got a big mouth. Want him to shut up. So they decide in their minds that they're going to take care of him. Bind him up. Sell him into slavery. Think about killing him. But as life would have it, in a season of need, they show up where he is in his rightful position. See, even though they do you bad, even though they do you dirty, sometimes they still got to come right back to you. Even though they try to make you believe that you are not what God called you to be, because they see it, eventually they come right back around to you. And because they were wrong, they expected him to be wrong. But he had already elevated above it. When they came, he said, you meant it for evil, but God means it for good. There are some things that you are experiencing that are just intended to help you develop patience. When you, according to James, it says, whenever you face trials of any kind, consider it nothing but joy. Count it all joy, because you know the testing of faith produces patience. And so sometimes you have to be able to stand up in the face of provocation. You have to be able to stand in the face of misfortune. You have to be able to stand in the face of pain. You have to be able to stand on your own big spiritual feet in the face of complaints and criticism and losses of temper and irritation and the like. Because you remember that you're not just a human being. You're a spiritual being having a spiritual experience. I like the way Donald Lawrence says it too. You're not a natural being. Oh, no. How's he say it? You're not a natural being having a spiritual experience, but you're a spiritual being living this natural experience. Is that right? Yeah.